Journalist Jane Eisner has written the first biography of Carole King, She Made the Earth Move. In it, she chronicles King's life and her extraordinary career, which has defined American popular music for more than half a century. If you're a Carole King fan, stay tuned to learn more about this iconic performer. Hi, I'm Dan Skinner, and this is Some Books Considered. Jane Eisner is a journalist, educator, and nonprofit leader. Her work has appeared in the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Atlantic, the Los Angeles Times, and many other publications. She joins us to talk about her biography, Carole King, She Made the Earth Move. Jane, welcome to Some Books Considered.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, let's talk about the inspiration, although Carole King is an inspiration in herself, but why did you want to write a biography of her?
Well, I've been a fan since Tapestry was released in 1971. It really meant a lot to me and my peers. So I followed her career ever since then. I saw a concert. I saw Beautiful 3 times. And when the opportunity came for me to write this interpretive biography for Yale University Press as part of the Jewish Lives series, I was so glad to be able to really delve into her life, into her music, and the impact she had on American popular culture.
Well, take us back to the early days of her life. What was she like as a child? And understand, even as a very young child, she displayed musical aptitude.
That's true. She was born in 1942. She was raised in an area of Brooklyn called Sheepshead Bay, Gravesend. Both neighborhoods kind of came together. She did have an aptitude for piano at a very young age. She started to learn to play. Her mother taught her. She started to learn to play at 4 years old. She was so tiny, she's pretty short, that they had to put what used to be known as telephone books on the seat of the piano so she could reach the keys. And she did show not just an aptitude, but an interest in playing piano. One of her classmates said to me, we all had to take piano lessons, but she was the only one who seemed to enjoy it. and the piano was very important in her household. She said it was the first piece of furniture her parents bought. So she grew up in this working class neighborhood. Her father was a firefighter. Her mother was a part-time teacher. And she was surrounded by other children and grandchildren of immigrants who were really striving to become part of American society.
Even as a child, she started getting exposure and recognition for her talents and appeared on various programs. But fame was something that, comes to someone who's talented like she is, if they're lucky. But at the same time, she didn't feel good about it always.
That's true. There's a fantastic public high school in New York City, still exists, the High School for Performing Arts. It's very competitive to get into. And one time she did not get an acceptance, and then she did. And she went there for a semester in the beginning of 10th grade. It was a long commute for her, but it also was filled with aspiring students who wanted to be on Broadway and in Hollywood, and she didn't feel comfortable there. So after one semester, I think, much to her mother's dismay, she went back to her local high school, James Madison High School. But that high school was just an amazing place. First of all, again, filled with all these striving students, but also with a real emphasis on music. So there was a music competition every year. 10th and 11th and 12th graders got together and wrote their own plays and their own songs, and then they would perform them for the students. And the students would vote on which one was best. And every year, she was then Carole Klein, was part of her grades. They called it Sing, capital letters, SING. Every year she was involved in it. Her class won, her grade won. And I think there was a lot of affirmation for her talent, and also it was her way of surrounding herself by people who shared her passion. Um, she wasn't conventionally beautiful. She wasn't this highly popular student, but what she had was music, and that was the way she identified in high school.
And this conflicted relationship with fame manifested itself throughout her career.
Well, it did. It's important to remember that she began by just writing music. She was behind the scenes. And when she began to do this in the late 1950s and early 1960s, popular music was created like almost in a factory. One person wrote the lyrics, one person wrote the music, one person produced it, another person performed it. So she was in the background, and that's where she felt comfortable. It was only when she moved to California, became this really unique link between the old way that music was produced and the new way, the singer-songwriter movement. And she then kind of was pushed on stage, first by James Taylor, her long, long time friend and colleague. And once she started to perform, it was thrilling to her when she could connect to the audience. But there was also something terrifying about it for her. So that's where part of the anguish comes from. And I think the other part was that the singer songwriter movement, as it grew up in what was known as Laurel Canyon, uh, near the recording studios in Los Angeles, but still a place in the late 60s, early 70s, where there were a lot of singer songwriters there. I mentioned James Taylor, Joni Mitchell, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, all sorts of people were there, and they kind of worked together and played together. But she was the only one who was a mother. And that really made it so that she was conflicted. She had by then 4 children by 2 different husbands. She grew up in this kind of 1950s ideal of what a woman should do, which was to basically be a homemaker. But she was pulled to the road to try to perform her music. And you see that anguish in a song like So Far Away, which was written while she was on the road and where she really missed, especially her then husband, Charlie Larkey, and her children.
She was married 4
Yes.
times. What impact did that have on her music?
Oh, I think it had a great impact. Her first husband was Jerry Goffin. He has sadly since died. Um, and together they had just an extraordinary dynamic, which led to just memorable songs. Will You Love Me Tomorrow, Up on the Roof, You Make Me Feel Like a Natural Woman, and so many others. When they divorced, that's when she moved with her 2 children to Laurel Canyon. And she ended up marrying, as I mentioned, Charlie Larkey, who was a musician himself, but 5 years younger than she was. And after a while, that marriage split up. It's still really unclear what led to that. She's kind of fuzzy about it in her memoir. But I think part of it was just he missed his 20s. He suddenly got married to this woman who already had 2 kids, and then they had 2 more together. And so they split up. But still, those 2 marriages, I think, led to very, very fertile songwriting and performing. But then she met somebody who persuaded her to live in Idaho, and really in remote Idaho. And that was her third husband, Rick Evers. He had so many problems. She acknowledges that he abused her verbally and physically before and after they married. And he ended up dying of a drug overdose. And then she met and married her fourth husband, another Rick, Rick Sorensen. His nickname was TP Rick, so you can get a sense of what he was like. He was a real mountain man. And she lived with him for many years. 3 of those years was totally off the grid. I think she was truly trying to escape life in the spotlight and create a different sort of space for herself in this very remote area. And that's when her songwriting was not memorable. It, I do think that being in Idaho, and especially those years of being so remote, may have nurtured her soul, but it didn't nurture her music.
Later in life, she also turned to politics.
Yes.
What can you tell us about the things that really mattered to her that got her involved in this?
Well, from the beginning, and this goes back to her participation in Gary Hart's campaign for president, which was unsuccessful. I think the issue that has motivated her the most and most deeply was environmental issues, and especially preservation of the Rockies. Her time in Idaho, which is still her official residence, really led her to love that outdoors space and want to preserve it. So that has led her to support legislation to do that, and also to support candidates who she believes will be on that side and help preserve this environment.
I want to come back to her music because it is so special to especially people of a certain generation, but I think it continues to speak to people today. And I'm wondering what you think about her music in terms of the quality that makes it something that still people enjoy and feel emotional about even today.
Well, I think there's two things. First, the lyrics are just so authentic and they speak to you. And they speak about love and loneliness and connection. And in most of the songs, even when she speaks about things that are broken, like it's too late, she there's a sense of optimism about her. Even in a song like that, she, in the last verse, talks about that there'll be love again for me and you. And I think it speaks to the anguish so many people feel, but also the optimism that you want to have. And the second thing was that her music, it may seem simple when you hear it, but I took piano lessons for a couple of years to try to play it and understand it. It is so much more complex than you realize. She was experimenting with new song structure, with new chord structure, and that it was perhaps intuitive for her, but for us listening to this, it sends a deeper message than just the lyrics. So I'll give you an example. Everybody knows You've Got a Friend, right? It's become like an anthem. I must have sung it 1,000 times with friends. But it was only when I began to really study the song that I realized what was going on, because she opens the song describing a problem when you're down and troubled. And that verse is in a minor key. And a minor key tends to be uncomfortable for the ear. And then when she talks about the solution, you just call out my name, she switches to a major key. And a major key feels more resolved for the ear. It makes you feel like there's kind of maybe some order in the world. And that's just a small example of the way she melded her lyrics, and she wrote that herself, with her music to um, uh, lead the listener to maybe even unconsciously understand the song on a deeper level.
Well, there's so much more in this book that we can talk about in this brief interview. But what new appreciation of Carole King do you hope readers will take from the book?
Well, I think she was a trailblazer in so many ways. As much as she might have been socially awkward and perhaps had some questionable choices and husbands, um, she was a master of the studio. It was described that when she got into that recording studio, and in the early days, it was mostly just her, she was the only woman. There were only men. She was in charge. She knew how the song should sound. And in other ways as well. I mentioned that she was often the first woman and definitely the first mother in her roles. She wasn't an outspoken feminist. I think it was just not necessarily what she said, but what she did. And then again, I think her music is so original and authentic. That's why it appeals to even new audiences now because it speaks to those feelings that are kind of universal.
To learn more, the book is Carole King, She Made the Earth Move by Jane Eisner. Jane, thank you for talking with me today.
Oh, it was such a pleasure to have this conversation.
If you'd like to purchase this first Carole King biography, I've placed a link for you in the description below. If you enjoyed this conversation, please subscribe, like, and click on the bell so you know when I post new interviews. Meanwhile, here are 2 more books you might find interesting. I'm Dan Skinner. Thank you for watching this edition of Some Books Considered.